Good evening, everyone. All of you can see my screen. Could you please confirm? Is my screen visible for everybody? Yeah, perfect. Guys, in the last session, we discussed about what is @query, what is @modifying, @transactional, and what is timestamping in the data JPA, what is the purpose of creation timestamp, update timestamp, we discussed. All right. Then we implemented soft delete functionality. Soft delete means making the record as inactive instead of deleting the record permanently from the database. So in the real-time projects, we will implement delete functionality in two ways. One is hard delete and another one is soft delete. Hard delete means deleting the record from the DB permanently using delete query. Whenever we execute a delete query to delete the record, that record will be deleted permanently from the database. Once the record is deleted permanently from the database, we can't get that record back. Okay. Here, in sometimes, we don't want to lose the data permanently, but we want to hide the data in the application. Then we can go for soft delete. Soft delete means updating the record as inactive. Soft deleted records will present in DB, so we can access whenever we want. So how to implement soft delete? To implement a soft delete, we will maintain a column in the database table. You can use any name for that column, but mostly people will use the name as active switch. If a active switch is Y, that is active record. If active switch is N, that means it is deleted record. So when user click on the delete, instead of deleting the record, we will update the record switch as N. So like that, we can implement soft delete. Perfect. So today we are going to understand what is primary key and composite primary key. Primary key and composite primary key in DB. Primary key, nothing but a constraint which is used to maintain unique records in the table. So what is the main purpose of the primary key? Primary key is a constraint. Primary key is a constraint to maintain unique records in the table. Primary key constraint is the combination of two constraints. Primary key is equal to unique plus not null. Whenever we declare one column as a primary key, in that column we can store only unique data, and that column value should have some value. We can't insert a record with the primary key column as empty. That is not possible. Primary key is a constraint to maintain unique records in the table. Right. Now, this primary key constraint is the combination of unique plus not null. If we try to insert a duplicate record in the primary key column, we will get unique constraint exception. If we try to insert duplicate value in primary key column, in PK column value, then we will get unique constraint exception. It is not going to accept the duplicate value. So we need to maintain unique data in the primary key, like employee ID, product ID, customer ID, book ID, any IDs that we want to represent as a unique value. For that, we will go for this primary key. Primary key, nothing but unique plus not null constraint. So if we try to insert a duplicate value in the primary key column value, then we will get unique constraint exception. Getting my point? Now, so to generate the primary key, we are not going to ask user to enter the primary key. So in our registration form, login form, we don't ask users to enter the primary key because users may enter duplicate value. We should not ask end users to enter the values for primary key column. We should not ask end users to enter value for PK column because users may enter duplicate value. Users may enter duplicate value. To avoid the duplicate values in the primary key column, we will generate that primary key values by using generators concept. To generate the value for primary key columns, to generate value for primary key column, we will use generator concept. Getting my point, guys? To generate the value for primary key column, we will use generator concept. So what is this generator? What is the advantage of the generator? Generators are used to generate the value for primary key column within the application. When I want to insert a record into a database table, I don't want to set the value for primary key column because there is a chance of setting the duplicate value. So that's why I will use generators concept. By using this generators concept, we can set the value for primary key column in the database. Now, let me go for one application here. Now, I'm taking one more entity. Let me take a new class. I want to create one new entity with a name called product. Okay. In this entity, I will take some variables and I will create the table in the database. Now let us take private integer product ID, private string product name, private double product price. So like this, I'm taking three variables in my class. I want to represent this class as an entity class. For that, I will be using @entity annotation. Okay, writing the table is optional. If you don't write the table, then class name will be considered as table. Okay, guys. Now, but whenever we are performing database operation, we need to map our variable to primary key column. To map our variable to primary key column, we will be using @ID annotation. @ID will represent that as a primary key column. Okay, guys. Now, here I'm using int. Guys, int is a primitive type or int is a wrapper. What data type I'm using now? I'm using primitive type. I'm using primitive data type. Into primitive type, I'm using double price. That is also a primitive type. Okay, fine. Now let me write here. Let me write one zero param constructor and let me write one parameterized constructor for my entity. Zero param constructor and parameterized constructor I'm writing for my entity, and I'm writing setters and getters also for this class. Setters and getters are used to set the data and get the data. Okay, I'm writing setters and getters for my variables. Setters and getters for my variables. So this is my entity class. This is ID. Entity annotation is used to represent this class is an entity class which represents a database table. @table I'm not writing. The reason is if I don't write @table, my class name will be used as table name. Product ID is a variable, will be mapped with product ID column in the table, and I want to represent this as a primary key. For that, I'm using @ID. Now, for this product entity, I will create one product repository. So to perform the operations with that, we need a repository. So I'm going to create one repository with a name called product repository. Product repository interface will be using product entity. Okay. So guys, do you know how to create a repository? Do you know how to develop our repositories using data JPA? Extends from JPA repository. I'm extending the properties from JPA repository, right? So here we are going to specify this repository belongs to product. This repository belongs to product, and we are going to give it as data type. What is the data type? Integer. Okay, guys, the data type is integer. So with this, I created my repository interface. Now let's go to our entity class. Entity class is ready. Repository is also ready. Now let's go to our start class. Here, I want to start IOC container. For that, run method is available. This run method is calling from the main method. Main method is entry point for the boot application. Now I want to get this repository object. So do you know how to get the object from IOC container? Can you guys tell me how to get the object from IOC container? IOC container will create the objects. We can get the objects by using getBean method. What is that? Context dot getBean repository, which is product repository dot class. Product repository dot class. Now enter. So we are getting product repository object. So we can also call it as product repo. We can call it as a product repo. Now I want to insert a record by using save method. Okay, guys. Now see here, product repo dot save. I need to pass entity object. I need to create product entity. Product P is equal to new product. Now I'm not setting any data for the product object, guys. Just I am passing P object as a parameter. System.out.println done. Product inserted. Product inserted. All right. So here I'm using repository.getBean. I'm getting my product repository bean object. I'm creating the object for entity class. I'm not setting any data. I'm just creating one empty object and I'm calling save method with this empty entity object. Okay. Let's go to our properties file or YML. Application DDL auto is update. If the table is not available, table will be created in the database. All right. Go to our workbench, connect with the database and check the tables which are available in the database. Our database is a new database, so definitely this product table will not be available. Use SBMS27. Now here, I'm going to execute a command called show tables. All right, run this. So what is the table we are getting here? Student details. So how many tables available in our database? Only one table is available. That is also student details table is available. Now I'm going to run my program. Can you guys guess what will happen when I run this program? Can you guys guess what will happen when I run this program? Come on. What will happen when I run this program? Table will be created because of this DDL auto. Record will be inserted or record will not be inserted. Record will be inserted or record will not be inserted. Come on, guys. Record will be inserted or not inserted? I need your response. Please participate in the session. Please, guys, be active. Exception आएगा क्या? Some people are saying that it will insert. Some people are saying that it won't insert. Okay, let's check this. Run as boot application. I'm trying to insert a record in the database table. I'm trying to insert a record in the database table by using save method, predefined method. Let us check the console. We will understand which queries will be executed by this application. We will understand the queries which will be executed by this application. Yes, my application started. Okay. Table is created. Insert query executed. Record inserted or record is not inserted? Create a table product. Class name is used as a table name. Variables product ID, integer, not null. Product name, varchar, product price, primary key, product ID. So how it understood that I'm using a primary key in this? Now let me take this query. Let me show you how the query is prepared. Create a table product. Here we are having product ID, and here we are having product name, and we are having product price, and here we are having primary key. Okay, guys. So my table is having a primary key. How our JPA understood that product ID is a primary key? Because of this ID annotation that we have taken here. If I give ID for this variable will be mapped to primary key column. Now go to database, show tables. Can you see product table is created? Yes. Record also inserted. But actually in my code, am I setting the value for the product or it is my empty object? It is my empty object. Now see what data is inserted into that table. Select star from product. Run this query. Can you see? ID inserted as 0, name is null value, price is 0. When I am not setting the data, it should consider as a null value. But here, it is taking ID as 0, price as 0. Can you think and tell me why it is doing like that? Can you think and tell me why it is doing like that? Why it is taking 0, 0 for ID and price? The reason is our entity class having a problem. We should not use primitive data types in the entity. I am using primitive data types in the entity. So whenever in the normal Java concept, whenever we create the object for a class, memory will be allocated for the variables with the default values. Int data type default value is 0. String default value is null. Double default value 0.0. Like this, for the instance variables of the class, memory will be allocated and values will be initialized with the default values. Are you getting my point? Public class product is available. Private int product ID 0. Private string product name null value. Private double product price 0.0. When I am creating object for the product class, the memory allocated for the variables, they are initialized with the 0. That is the reason record is inserted with the ID as 0, price as 0. When I am not setting the data, it should insert null values in the database. It should not insert default values. Okay, how to fix this problem? Can you tell me how to fix this problem? When I am not setting the data, record should insert with null value, not with the default value. Price is 0. No, we don't accept it. Nah. So now, here guys, the problem is our entity. Whenever we are writing the entities, we should not use primitives. The problem with the primitives is, if you don't initialize the variable, it will take the default value. Instead of the primitive data type, it is highly recommended to go for wrapper classes. Highly recommended to go for wrapper classes. When you go for wrapper class, what is the default value? Null. What is the default value? Null value. Now, if I don't set the ID, it will consider that ID value as a null. If I don't set the name, it will consider that as a null. If I don't set the price, it will consider as a null. Okay, guys. When we are not setting the values, it should consider as a null value, not the default value. Now tell me, primitive types we need to use in the entity class variables, or we need to use wrapper classes? We should use primitive data types, or we should use wrapper classes? Come on. We should use primitive data types or we need to use wrapper classes. Primitive types or wrapper classes. Guys, primitive types we need to use are wrapper class, wrapper. Wrapper classes are recommended, not the primitives. You understand the problem with the primitives? You understand the problem with the primitive types? When we don't set the value for the variable, it will take the default value. That's why we should go for primitive types. We should not go for primitive types because even if we don't set the value, it is taking the default value. We don't want that default value. If we don't set the value, it should consider null value. Now, let me execute this program now. Now, can you guys tell me what is the behavior of this program? I'm trying to execute this program. Empty product object. I'm not setting any value for this. Now, can you tell me what will happen now? Can you guys tell me what will happen now? Null pointer exception. Null, null, null. Try this. Run as boot application. I'm trying to insert a record with the empty entity object. Now we got the problem. What is the problem? Invalid property exception. And we are getting invalid property product ID of bean class. Getter for property throw exception. Invocation target exception. Okay, guys. Now, are we able to insert the record or we are not able to insert the record? We are not able to insert the record. Why? Here, primary key is available, product ID. But for the product ID, we are not setting any value. Then it will take default value. It will take the default value. Okay, guys. Now, suppose I'm setting p.product ID as 101. I'm setting the product ID as a 101. Product name I am setting p.set product name as mouse. Okay. There are three variables available in the product. ID and name. There are three variables in the product. One is ID, second one is name, but I am setting the data only for the ID and name, not for the price. Now let's try. Run as boot application. Now I am trying to insert my record. Now, product price cannot be null. Invalid SQL integrity constraint violation exception. So could not execute the statement. Data integrity exception. What is that exception? Constraint violation exception. This could not be executed. So which value, which variable? Product price cannot be null. SQL constraint violation exception. So when I give product price when I'm not giving that, it is saying that product price cannot be null value. Now describe our table. Describe product table. So what is the structure of the product table? Okay, guys. By default, this price is a double value. Data type it has taken as a double value. So you cannot insert null value, some value required. Because earlier we have taken this now, product ID, int type, product price, double value. The default price is null. Null cannot be inserted here. Null cannot be inserted here. The product ID is a primary key. It should not be null and it should be unique. Price double, some number, but we are trying to insert null. It cannot be null value. It is throwing the exception. Now we need to set p.set product price. We are going to set the price value, some value 100.20. Now run as boot application. Now I'm setting the values for that and I'm trying to insert. Now select query executed, insert query is executed. Select star from product now. You can see the record is inserted into database table. The record is inserted into database table. Here fine, name I am setting, price I am setting, but ID, is it recommended to set the primary key value through program? Not recommended. We should not set the value for the primary key because users may enter some duplicate value. Always we need to generate the value for primary key columns. Okay, we need to generate the value for primary key columns. How to generate the value for the primary key column? That's where generators comes into picture. So to generate the value for primary key column, we will use generators concept. How to use that generator concept? Wherever you have the variable mapped to primary key column, for that you need to use one annotation called @generated value. You need to use annotation called @generated value, which is used to generate the value for our primary key column. Now let me truncate my table. Truncate product. Truncate means I'm just deleting the records available in the table. Select star from product. No records are available. Now I'm not setting the product ID. I'm just setting the name and price. For ID, I have given @generated value. For ID, I have given @generated value. For that, it is going to generate the value for the primary key. Let us see how the value will come for the primary key. I'm setting only product name and product price. Click on save method. Run as boot application. Go to console. See the behavior of our application. It failed. Null pointer exception. Why? Insert into Hibernate sequence values, invalid property exception, property product ID of bean class get product ID through exception. Nested exception is invocation target exception. It is trying to create a table, Hibernate sequences, next value big int, invocation target exception, null pointer exception. So is it taking that a Hibernate sequence and is it taking the Hibernate sequence or it is not taking that Hibernate sequence? Is it taking the Hibernate sequence or it is not taking the Hibernate sequence? It is not taking the Hibernate sequence. Okay. Product name, product price. Here I have product ID. For the product ID, I have given one annotation called generated value. Whenever we are using this generated value, we need to specify the strategy. When we are working with MySQL database, we need to specify the strategy as identity. That means we are telling the Hibernate or we are telling the JPA to use identity generator to generate the value for my primary key column. Okay, let me use this identity generator. Let me try and execute this application. Run as boot application. I have used identity generator. Now also it is failing. Invalid property exception. Invalid product ID, getter for product ID throwing the exception. 1 minute. Yeah, these are the variables. Generation type is identity. Let me drop my table. I'm deleting my table. Then show tables. Hibernate sequence and student details are available. Let's go here and execute. Run as boot application. Create table product ID. Inserted the record into table. Now check this. Primary key. Identity generator we are using. Whenever we use identity generator, it is using auto increment in the database. Now go to table, select star from product. Product ID is 1, product name, product price. Product ID 1, am I setting that value or it is generating that value automatically? Am I setting the product ID or I am not setting the product ID? In the entity object, am I setting the product ID? I'm not setting the product ID. I'm not setting the product ID. Now let me go for another product, which is a keyboard. Here I'm giving the price as 200. I'm giving the product name as a keyboard. I'm giving the price as 200. Let us see the behavior. Run as boot application. Run as boot application. Now one more record is inserted. Go to table. Now can you see second record inserted with ID as 2? Do we need to set the value for the primary keys? Do we need to set the value for the primary key? Or we no need to set the value for the primary key? We no need to set the value for the primary key. We can use generators to generate the value for primary key. Okay. Few generators will work in MySQL database. Few generators will work in the Oracle database. If you are using MySQL database, then you need to go for identity generator. If you are using MySQL database, we need to go for identity generator to generate the value for primary key column. Identity generator will use internally auto increment concept. Identity generator will not work for Oracle database. In the Oracle, we will use sequence generators, whereas in the MySQL, we are going to use identity generator. Suppose if you are using Oracle database, then you need to specify your generation type as sequence. Auto, identity, sequence, table. There are 4 generation strategies are available. One is auto. Based on the database, it is going to pick up the generator. Another one is identity that we are going to use with the MySQL databases. And we are having another generator which is called sequence. And we are having another generation type called table. Another generation type called table. So like this, there are several generation types are available. Okay. Auto, identity, sequence, table. Clear, guys? Can I start the value from 100? Yes. If you go for custom generator, then you can go for that value generation from 100. Okay, guys. If you have a custom generator, that means if you don't want to use this generator, if you want to go for a custom generator, then you can go for 1000 starting from 1000, starting from 2000. Any number you can give in the custom generator. Here, if I'm using generation type as auto, let's observe. I'm going to specify my DDL type as create. I'm specifying my table type as create. DDL type because I want to delete the old things and I want to create the new table. I'm giving generation type as auto. Let us see the behavior of it. Okay, go to application, run as boot application. What auto generator is doing? Now see guys, how many queries are executed? Drop table, drop product, drop student, create table Hibernate sequence, insert into Hibernate sequence, create a table product, update the product Hibernate sequence next value, insert into product. That means to maintain our primary keys, it is maintaining one more table in the database, which is called Hibernate sequences. If you use Oracle, in the Oracle, it will use Hibernate sequence internally. So from database to database, auto generator functionality will change. That means it is polymorphic. Based on your database, auto generator will do the functionality. If you are using auto generator with the Oracle database, it will create a sequence with this name to insert the record into table. Oracle will support for sequences, whereas MySQL database will not support for the sequences. As MySQL database is not supporting for the sequences, it is creating a table with the name and it is inserting one record into that table. That table will maintain the sequence of the primary key. So whenever you are trying to insert a record, it will take the value from that table, it will insert the record into table, and that table value will be updated. See here, create a table Hibernate sequence, insert into Hibernate sequence, okay? Then select the next value from Hibernate sequence to insert our record. After getting the next value, it is updating that table value and it is inserting the record into our table. Now go to database, select star from product, record inserted with 1. Similarly, you can see internally one table got created with a name called Hibernate underscore sequence. What is there in the Hibernate underscore sequence? Hibernate underscore sequence table is maintaining primary key columns for our records. Select star from Hibernate sequence. See here, next value 2 is already there. I already inserted one record into my table. It has taken ID as 1. After taking the 1 from that table, it already updated the value to 2. So now, if I insert a record into product table, next value will come as 2. Now, let's try to do this. Here I'm changing, instead of keyboard, I'm using it as motherboard. I'm using motherboard. So here I'm setting only name of the product. I'm setting the price of the product. ID I'm not setting because it is a primary key. Then how it will fetch that ID? It will fetch that ID from this Hibernate sequence table where the next value is available. First, it will execute select query to get the data from the sequence table. Then it will update this value to 3 for the next record. First, you retrieve the value, use it for your record, then increment that value. Now observe this. I'm running my program with the motherboard. Here, to show you the demo, I need to remove this DDL auto, guys. I need to remove this DDL auto. Why? I don't want to delete the existing data. I don't want to delete the table. I removed that property completely. Now go and run the application, run as boot application. Now see, first it is taking the value from the Hibernate sequence, then immediately it is updating the table for the next value and it is inserting the record into our table. Earlier it inserted with 1, now when you execute that product table, the record is inserted with 2 and this Hibernate sequence table value updated to 3. So always what is our next primary key will be maintained in the Hibernate sequence table. So whenever we use auto, it is internally creating a table with a name called Hibernate sequence. Same program, if I run in the Oracle database, it will create a sequence with this name to maintain the next value for our records insertion. Auto is a polymorphic generator, depends on the database it is going to behave. Are you guys getting my point? What is the generation type as auto? Can you read the documentation? What auto is telling, can you read the documentation? Completed, guys. It is indicating that persistence provider should pick up an appropriate strategy for the particular database. The auto generation strategy may expect a database resource to exist, or it may attempt to create a one. So here, as I'm using this auto generator in my MySQL database, it is creating a table to maintain my primary keys. Same generator, if you use in the Oracle database, you will get Hibernate sequence. Current value, next value, like that, you can use the Hibernate sequence concept. Are you guys clear? Now, next one is identity generator. Okay. Identity generator is available. So identity generator will work only in the MySQL, guys, not in the Oracle. Okay. Identity generator will work only in the MySQL. It will work based on the auto increment. When we want identity generator, we need to recreate our table. Our table should be recreated with the auto increment. When we use the generation type as an identity, it should use the auto increment internally to create the table. Go here, right click, run as boot application. Right click, boot application. No. So it will recreate our table. It will delete the existing table. It created the new table. So as I have given generation strategy, as I have given the generation strategy as identity, it used auto increment. As I have given generation strategy as identity, it used auto increment. You got my point? Observe the query. Guys, understood why the tables are dropped? The tables are dropped because of this property which I have given DDL auto as a create. As I have given DDL auto as a create, all the tables will be deleted and it will be new created. Got it? Now, as I have given the generation type as identity, it is using auto increment. For every record, the value will be incremented. Currently, the record is inserted with 1 because of auto increment. When I insert a next record, it will go to 2. Next record will go to 3. Next record will go to 4, 5, like that. It is going to do auto increment. Okay. Suppose if you go for sequence generator, here generation type we have as a sequence. Sequence generator will not support in the MySQL. It is used only in the sequence supported databases. Oracle will support for the sequence. MySQL will not support for the sequence. Now, let me run my application. Application.java, run as boot application. All right, guys. Next value as ID value from Hibernate sequence for update. Insert into Hibernate sequence values. Create table Hibernate sequence. So whenever we use sequence also as a generator, is it creating the sequence or it is creating a table in the database? Is it creating a sequence or it is creating a table in the database? It is creating a table in the database because MySQL database will not support for sequences. If you use this sequence generator with the Oracle, then actual sequence will be created. As MySQL will not support for the sequences, it is creating a table to maintain our primary key values. Are you clear? In Hibernate sequence, a table is created. In the table, one value will be available. Every time it will read the next value. and it will insert into our record and that value will be updated. See, these are the three queries. First, reading the value for the primary key from the Hibernate sequence table, and it is updating the record into that table, and it is inserting the record into our table. That means our primary key column value will be maintained in the another table. Our primary key column value will be maintained in the another table when you go for sequence with MySQL. But if you use a sequence with the Oracle, that is a different story. It will maintain a sequence to maintain our values. Now, same thing will happen whenever you use the generation type as table. It will maintain a separated table to maintain the primary keys. Already we have seen when you go for auto, or when you go for sequence, or when you go for a table in the MySQL database, the behavior is same. I'm using generation type as a table. Let's observe the behavior. Run as boot application. Go for boot application. I'm running this with the table. Now, again, you can see that it is creating a table with a name called Hibernate sequences only. Are you guys getting my point? It is creating Hibernate sequences only. That means whenever we use generation type, strategy type as auto or sequence or table, behavior is same. Behavior is same. In MySQL database, in MySQL DB, auto, sequence, table, generation, strategy, behavior is same. If you use auto increment, it will use, if you use identity, if we use identity generator, then identity will use auto increment to generate the value for primary key. Okay, auto, sequence, table, behavior is the same in MySQL database, MySQL DB. When you use MySQL DB, auto generation strategy, sequence generation strategy, or table generation strategy, behavior is same. Suppose if you go for Oracle database, then auto will use Hibernate underscore sequence. It will use sequence to generate primary key value. Okay, so if you use sequence, we can configure our own sequences. We can configure our own sequence to generate PK value. How to configure our own sequence? Create a sequence, PID underscore sequence, start with 1000, increment by 1, like this we can specify. So this is a syntax to create a sequence. Somebody is asking, sir, how to start the value from 1000 or 100? You can create your own sequence in the database and you can use that sequence to generate the value for the primary key. For that sequence, you can specify start with 1000, increment by 1. Okay. Suppose, for example, in the MySQL database, if you want to start with 100, we need to create this Hibernate sequence table and we need to update that table start value as 100. Then every time it will take the 100 and it will increment by 1. So if you want to start from 100 directly, not from 1, here Hibernate sequences table we need to create. In that sequences table, we need to keep the value as 100. So every time when our application started, it will select the data from the Hibernate sequences. If you keep 100 value in the table as a first value, it will take 100 and it will insert our record with 100. For next value, it will increment that value in the table. Like this, you can start the primary key value, based on our requirement. If you are using MySQL, then we will go for this sequence concept. We can configure our own sequence to generate primary key value. Auto sequence to generate the primary key value using sequence internally. Default sequence is Hibernate sequence. Name will be that. Default sequence name, which is Hibernate underscore sequence. Hibernate underscore sequence. Here I'm using sequence generator. We can configure our own sequence to generate primary key value like below. You can create your own sequence and you can set the start value and you can set the increment value. Okay. So if you go for a table, it will create a new table to maintain our primary key. So how a new table is created here? Similarly, a new table will be created to maintain our primary keys. New table will be created to maintain primary key column values. Are you guys clear with my point? New table will be created to maintain primary key column values. So in the MySQL DB, auto sequence or table will maintain new table to maintain the primary key column values. When you use identity generator, it will use auto increment to generate the value for primary key column value. To generate the value for primary key column value. Got it? If you go for work and remember one point, MySQL DB will not support for sequences. MySQL DB will not support sequences. Oracle database will support for sequences. Oracle DB will not support for auto increment. Oracle DB will not support for auto increment. Will not support for auto increment. Oracle DB will not support for auto increment. Okay, so that means which database we are using, based on that we need to use our generators. If you use auto, it is common for both, right? It will use, if you use auto generator, based on the database, it will change the behavior. So if you anybody having Oracle database in your system, keep auto generator, then it will use a sequence to generate the value for primary key column. Okay. Now, if you have MySQL DB, auto generator will use new table to create. So that means literally when you go for MySQL database, auto or sequence or table, functionality is the same. They will maintain a new table to maintain the primary key column values. So if you go for identity, that means it will use auto increment to generate the value for primary key. MySQL DB will not support for sequences. Oracle DB will not support for auto increment. In the Oracle DB, auto will maintain a sequence. Sequence means we can configure our own sequence to generate the PK value like below. Like this, we can write the sequence. You can create a sequence in your database. That sequence name we can configure. So some people who are using Oracle database, you can configure a custom sequence here. How to configure a custom sequence? To configure custom sequence, we will use sequence generator. Okay. Here we are going to write @generator. We are going to write @generator. Sequence generator is available. Name of that generator. What is your sequence name? My sequence name is PID sequence. PID sequence, and actual sequence name in the database is PID underscore sequence. Now here sequence type and generator is equal to PID underscore sequence. So if you want to maintain your own sequence to generate the value for the primary key, you need to create a sequence in the database and you need to configure that sequence in the entity class like this. In the interview, guys, in my system, Oracle DB is not available. The people who are having the Oracle DB, you can do configuration like this. Configuring custom sequence in the JPA to generate the value for primary. This is just alias name. You can give this alias name as anything, PID. Okay. When you give this as a PID, you will give this as a PID. This is the actual sequence which is created in the database. This is the actual sequence which is created in the database. That sequence value I'm configuring in my entity. So like this, we can configure custom sequence. Okay. This is the sequence creation, configuring custom sequence for Oracle database. Configuring custom sequence to generate PK value. Okay, guys. Now, first we need to create sequence. First we need to create a sequence in DB like below. You can give any name for the sequence, guys. So here I'm giving the sequence name, create sequence, PID sequence, start with 1000, increment by 1. First record value will be 1000. From next time, 1001, 1002, 1003 like this. Configure custom sequence in the entity like below. Configure custom sequence in entity class like below. Configure custom sequence in the entity class like below. That's it. Okay. So sequence generator, PID is the alias name, and this is the actual sequence name which is available in the database. That sequence we are going to configure as a generator PID. So whenever it executes generated value, what is the strategy? Sequence strategy. Who is the generator? If you don't give this generator, it will take the default sequence. I don't want to take the default sequence. I want to take my own sequence. My own sequence I will configure as a generator. That means I'm telling to generated value, you need to go for sequence generator. That sequence generator name is PID. Here it is the name of PID. PID generator is using PID sequence in the database. In the database, you need to create a sequence with this name. That sequence we need to configure for our entity. Then when we are using this entity in the Oracle database, it will use this PID sequence to generate the value for primary key. You can give your start value and min value, max value like that. Okay. If you are writing this kind of custom sequence, it will work only in the Oracle. It will not work in the MySQL. Suppose, for example, if you are using auto, that will work in the both databases, right? Auto, it depends upon the database it is going to work. Depends on the database, it is going to change the behavior. Auto means based on the database, your code is going to work. If your code is specific to Oracle, then using custom sequence is recommended. If your code is specific to MySQL, using auto increment is recommended. In the MySQL, we will be using auto increment. In the Oracle, we will be using sequences to generate the value for primary key columns. Guys, are you able to understand all the generation strategies are available here? 4 strategies are available: auto, identity, sequence, and table. Generators, which are used to generate the value for primary key column. Generators are used to generate the value for primary key column. Guys, are you clear with my point? MySQL does not support for sequences, guys. You can't do that. If in the MySQL, if you want to generate from 100, you need to create a table, that Hibernate sequence table. In that Hibernate sequence table, you need to insert first value as 100 so that it will take that value for every record. Auto increment will start with 1 always. Okay. So like this, we can use generators to generate the value for primary key. Generators are used to generate the value for primary key. If you use generation type as a table, so in that table, you need to specify that, right? So you need to use table generator. In the table generator, pick a column name, value column name, what is the table, initial value, you can give like this. Initial value is equal to 100. So table generator, you can specify, I want to set that initial value as 100. You can do that. Add the missing attributes. Name of the table is, I will use PID sequence. Okay, let's try this. Initial value I'm giving as 100. Name is equal to PID sequence. Okay, let me give this type as create application. I want to insert motherboard record. For the product ID, I'm giving the generator as table generator. Now let me insert a record, run as boot application. Okay guys, now go to the database and select star from products. It is taking product ID as 1. This table generator initial value is equal to this. Okay, sorry. Guys, is it considering our table generator or it is not considering our table generator? Is it considering our table generator? Is it not considering our table generator? It is not considering. Okay, name, and I want to specify value column name, catalog, indexes, PK column name, PK column value, schema, table is equal to, I want to use PID sequence table. Okay, name is equal to PID, and here I will use generator. Here I will use generator is equal to PID. Now I am telling to this generated value, hey, generated value, you take the generator as a PID. What is PID? This is my PID table generator. This table it has to use to generate the primary key value. This is the initial value that I am giving as 100. Now execute this. Right click, run as boot application. Right click as boot application. Now, which table it is using to maintain my primary keys, guys? From which table it is taking the primary key now? Primary key, PID sequence table it is using, and to insert that record. Select star from product. What is the product ID value it started? What is the product ID it started, guys? Am I able to give product ID as a 101? Why it is taking the product ID as a 101 now? Which generator it is using? It is using my table generator. In my table generator, I specified that initial value is equal to 100, name is equal to PID, table is equal to PID sequence table. I'm telling to this generated value to use this generator, this table, PID table. PID sequence table, I can say. Use PID sequence table. Right? Like this, you can configure that. Whatever the name we are giving for the generator, that name you need to configure as this generator value. That means this generated value annotation will pick up this generator based on the given name. Initial value is 100. So the next value will be 101. It inserted a record with 101. So where the primary keys will be maintained? The primary keys will be maintained in this table. Every time it will read the data from this table, it will insert the record into this table, it will update the record into this table. That means total 3 queries will execute in the background to insert one single record into the table. Now let us see. I'm removing this DDL auto create option. I don't need it because my table is already created. Let's check this. Run as boot application. See how many queries are executing in the background to insert my record. How many queries are executing to insert my records? How many queries are executed? One select query to get the primary key value. One update query to update the primary key value for the next record. one insert query to insert the record. So how many queries are generating in the background, man? 3 queries are generating in the background. Is it recommended? Or auto increment is recommended? This one is recommended or auto increment is recommended? Which one is recommended? Auto increment is recommended. Why? Why auto increment is recommended? Come on, guys. Why auto increment is recommended? Performance. With a single query, we can insert the record. Whereas if you go for this table generator or sequence generators now, it is using multiple queries in the backend to insert a record. So if you execute more queries, more time it will take and it will decrease your performance. Table generator, you can configure like this. Generation type as a table, I can configure like this. Table generator configuration. Okay, guys. Table generator configuration. Oracle DB and MySQL DB. Okay, configuring table generator. So in the MySQL, we are able to start that initial value from 101. So table generator, value, name, table name, which table it has to use to maintain the primary keys. Generated value annotation should take this table generator to generate the value. If you want to go for custom sequence in the Oracle database, then you can create a sequence like this. That sequence you can configure to generate the value from that sequence. Now, you may have a requirement. I want to generate my primary key value as TCS1, TCS2, TCS3, TCS4. I want my primary key column value like this. Okay, so this requirement we can't achieve by using predefined generators, guys. If you want to do this kind of requirement, we need to go for custom generator. That means we need to develop our own generator and we need to use that generator to generate the value for primary key columns. We need to develop our own generator to generate the value for primary key column. How to work with that custom generator? I have already uploaded one video on that part, guys. Very clearly I explained how to work with a custom generator in the data JPA. I want you people to go through that today. Custom generator, Ashok IT. Okay, so whatever you are asking. So I want to generate my own value for the generator. Spring Data JPA working with a custom generator. So please refer this video to understand how to work with a custom generator. So here you can use anything as your generator value. If you want to customize the generator value, primary key column value according to your project requirement, then you need to go for custom generator. So here Hibernate and JPA provided some generators, but my requirement is different. I want to generate the value according to my company requirement. For that, we need to develop custom generator. So I'm giving the video link of that custom generator. Please watch that video and practice it. If you have any questions that we can discuss in the tomorrow session regarding that custom generator. So here, whatever the generators are there, auto generator, sequence generator, table generator, identity generator, all these generators are predefined. But I'm not satisfied with these generators. I want to generate the value according to my requirement. Example, OD1, OD2, OD3. I want to generate the values like that. So that scenario can be implemented by using custom generator. I'm giving the link in the notes for custom generator. I request you to go through that video so that you will get the clarity on what is custom generator, how to implement that custom generator. This is a custom generator example I have implemented using Oracle database. In the classroom, we are discussing MySQL database. In this video, I used Oracle database to develop that custom generator and insert the record by using that custom generator. Are you clear? Are you clear? Yeah. Good, guys. Thank you. With this, I'm stopping for today. We'll meet in the tomorrow session. So today I thought of discussing two concepts. One is primary keys and non-primary keys, primary keys and composite primary keys, but already time up. We completed only primary key. In the tomorrow session, I'm going to discuss about composite primary key. Okay, so please practice primary key. Primary key is a constraint. Primary keys are used to maintain unique records in the table. So as primary key is a constraint, it is a combination of unique plus not null constraint. We should not insert the duplicate data. We should not insert the null data in the primary key column. Now, when we are having the primary keys, we need to maintain unique values. So to generate those unique values, we are going to use generators. Product ID is a primary. If you try to insert a duplicate record into that primary key, it will give constraint exception. In the MySQL database, we are having generators like this. In the Oracle database, we can use generators. We can configure table generator. We can configure custom sequence generator. If you want to develop your own generator, that also possible. Custom generator concept available. Okay. Thank you guys. Thank you. I'm going to upload the notes now. So please practice this before coming to tomorrow's session. We'll meet in the tomorrow's class. Tomorrow we'll talk about composite primary keys in the database. Thank you. Good night.